Hi, welcome to Vancouver Carpenter. My name's Ben, the suspiciously drywallery carpenter. I wanted to make a video that showed my full process of taping a drywall job. So the first thing I like to do is I like to prep all of my joints. So right here what I'm doing is I'm carving out a little V in all of the joints that I'm worried about potentially cracking. So this is a large ceiling and I want to make sure that there's plenty of mud in these joints. And same with that one, I'm joining a bulkhead to another piece. Next, I'm going to go around and I'm going to start scraping off loose paper and doing all the work I need to do to make sure that I don't get any blisters. So here I am, and it's a fair bit of work scraping all this stuff off. Sometimes it's actually easier just to replace that piece of drywall. But we just need to make it good enough for tile. Next, I'm going to apply an oil-based paint. The whole point of this is to make sure that the brown paper doesn't blister when you apply a coat of mud to it. So I'm really making sure that I'm actually getting paint under all the little flaps and everything too. Really want to saturate that. Here I'm getting ready to start patching all the little holes. So I'm putting mesh tape on all the small patches. And any patch, again, that I'm not terribly worried about cracking down the road, because I don't think anything can really happen to these ones. So it's mesh tape. I just use my knife to tear it off real quick and easy. Some of these joints behind the backsplash, they're never going to crack and they're going to be covered in tile. So mesh tape will be good enough for here. Okay, next it's time to mix up the confill. So this is just a lightweight setting type compound. And here I'm putting on the Tradesman Special Mask. It's the most widely used mask in the industry. A little more water, mix it up. So this mud has a small aggregate in it. It's a soft aggregate like a perlite, and it also has fiberglass in it, which gives it strength. It's used generally for coating concrete. I'm going to start pre-filling everything and also filling this stuff with mesh tape. And so right here you can see, we've got some joints that are pretty open, and we haven't spent a lot of time flushing the board up to make it really flush. But what we do is, it's faster to just pre-fill this with confill, and we've got time for drying on this job, so it's not going to be a problem. And at the same time, with the same mix, I'm going to be coating all of the things that I put mesh tape on, so all the little small patches all around the job, which always happens when the electricians have come by. They turn the place into Swiss cheese. Now here's another good example of a patch we didn't spend much time on. Just get a piece of board in it and pre-fill it. And now it's time to put confill over the backsplash area where all that paper that might blister that we painted is. And I find that, a nice coat of this stuff gives a nice flat surface for applying tile. So there's two reasons I like to use confill, especially at the beginning of the job. The aggregate in it makes it really good for floating out surfaces very evenly. And the other thing is, so over a surface like this, it's really bubbly. So when you apply a nice even layer, the bubbles have a hard time coming back through over the harder quickset once it sets up. Start pre-filling any of the open joints that need it. Sometimes when your patch is a little too gnarly to put mesh tape on right away, you do that pre-fill. So here it is, it's set up, and I go and put mesh tape over that patch. So we've patched another hole in the ceiling. So sometimes it's a two-step process. I'll get a nice even coat on it. Please tell me I'm not going to leave it like that. Oh, good. So now the next step before actually applying corner bead and tape is I have to go around and scrape off any little niblets that I've left from the pre-fill. And it is corner bead time. So how I like to do my corner beads is I don't run around with a tape measure. I just hold the piece up to where it needs to be cut and get a much more accurate measurement. So it's faster and more accurate. And I cut as many of them as I can all at one time. So I get them all laid up, ready to go. I like to do all my corner beads first because I like to have my tapes overlap onto my corner beads. I find it just makes it stronger and reduces callbacks over time. You don't get those little 1-inch cracks at the tops and bottoms of your corners. And it is now time to mix up a box of taping mud. And I also like to do the corner beads first because I like my mud thicker for corner beads. And you can always add more water to make it thinner for taping, but I can't make it thicker once it's too thin for corner beads. So I'm filling up my hopper. I love this thing. Once I have like maybe 10 or more beads, I'd like to bring it out. I might spend just as much time washing it, but it's such a useful tool. So then I'm going to run around and I'm going to stick all my corner beads on all at the same time. I'll usually just do one area at a time and put as many corner beads on as I can. And you have to be pretty quick about it because the drywall is going to start sucking the moisture out of the mud, and then it's going to be harder to squeeze it out with your knife after. So here I am just kind of setting them, making sure they're square before I start wiping the excess mud out. I actually enjoy setting beads quite a bit. It's satisfying. So I don't always level my beads, but this little nook needs to be just right. So for all these corners I brought my level out. The eyeball isn't good enough sometimes. So once these sides are set, then I'm able to cut these little ones that go in between, because you don't know exactly where your beads are going to wind up. I mean, they usually add about an eighth to a small eighth onto your corners, and it's really hard to actually factor that in. So what you need to do is you need to get the sides on first, and then you can actually cut the horizontal ones to length. So one of my little tricks for these is during the taping coat, what I actually do is I put a little mud on the intersections, because I find when you do that, what it means is they get 3 coats by the time the job's finished, and it just helps make them perfect. And now it is time for taping. So this is called the super taper. It's what we use up north here. And we just slop a whole bunch of tape into a bucket, and run around and kind of paper mache it onto the walls. And I know you guys that use a bazooka are going to say, what are you guys doing up there? But you know what? It's pretty cheap, it's easy, it's low maintenance, and it's easy on the body. So it's what I like to do. And here we are, slapping that tape on the ceiling. We've got a bunch of weird joints from ripping the bulkheads out of the ceiling here. And all these weird bulkheads that I'm having to tape around and build, those are all there because of pipes. So I also like to do the little short angle tapes while I'm taping all the other ones at the same time and have a knife in hand. I don't use my special tools for the short little tapes. I do them at the same time as all the flats and butts. One of the nice things about the super taper is the mud is really wet and it wipes out from the tape real nice and easy. So here I am. I also do the corners with the super taper. I've tried a lot of other methods, and over the years I found this to just be really quick, low maintenance, and it gets it done real nice and quick. So I roll it out with a nice blue line corner roller. I find the rolling with the corner roller makes all the difference. Gives it a nice crease. And then I use a 2.5-inch flusher. It's just a nice quick pass. Angles were never easier. Corner tools are money well spent. And then I wipe out the 3 ways, right hand side all the first time. And sometimes there's a bunch of little patches left over that I didn't feel like cutting out. And I just slop some tapes over them. It'll be pretty awesome once there's a tile backsplash covering it. Once the mud dries that's on the tape behind, it actually makes it kind of hard. So you could actually coat over it and you won't get any blisters. And I coat the screws last because once you've put your corner beads on and taped all your butts and flats, then there's less screws to coat. And I always make sure I coat the screws with taping mud or with Confill. Day 2, and it is time to coat the ceilings. And I often start with the things I want to do the least, so I've started with the ceilings. And what we are doing is we are coating over a glossy paint, orange peel texture. So it coats out pretty easy because the orange peel texture is not very thick, and we didn't have to do any scraping or any sanding. But the glossy paint is going to cause me problems down the road. Even though it hurts my shoulder and neck, there's still something pretty satisfying about coating ceilings. It's the sanding that gets me. And once the ceilings are done, I just kind of work my way around the site. So here I am working on the beads. And I don't always have an order for what I do with, whether it's corner beads or butts or flats. I often just kind of do one wall at a time, one area at a time, and move to the next. That way I'm not doing as many laps around the job site. I'm just basically finishing one area at a time and moving on to the next. I also find that when I do that, I do less laps around the job site. When you're going around and you're doing all the butt joints first, and then you're going around and doing all the corner beads next, and then you're going around and doing all the flat joints next, what I find is you can actually do a lot more mileage around the job site instead of just staying in one spot and putting mud on. Corner beads are fun. I actually really like doing first coat on corner beads. It goes pretty nice and quick. You don't have to make it too pretty. You just get the mud on there and don't take too much off. So, day 3. I hate sanding so much. If I never have to sand drywall again for the rest of my life, it'll be okay. But once the sanding's done, then I get to coating the angles. So here's the mud tube, the big giant mud syringe. So first you apply the mud into the corner with a mud applicator. It's got a couple of wheels and it rolls across the room, and you just kind of splarp the stuff out into the corners. But it does have to be even or you're going to make a big mess. That's not the mess. That's before you put the flusher on it. And then I go with a 3.5 inch flusher and smooth it all out nice and smooth. These are the tin flushers. So they are not the $400 tools. They are the $100 tools. And with the amount of drywall I do, they've lasted me a long time and they still give a really nice result. So what do you do with that mess in the corners? Well, you go around and you pull it out again. But usually I'll do the left-hand side of each one. And it looks like I kind of forgot that day and did the right-hand side again. I guess I needed another coffee. Now it's time to skim the ceilings and everything else on the job out again. So this time you have to spend a lot more time and attention in getting a really nice smooth finish. And because of the glossy paint, it's a real headache. It bubbles like crazy. So usually I like to leave a fairly thick coat on, so there's a little meat left to sand. But when you're skimming over previously painted surfaces, even if it's the second or sometimes third coat, it's going to bubble like crazy. Careful of that sprinkler. So here's those bubbles. They're the bane of my existence. I have killed my shoulder, skimming out walls and ceilings, eliminating bubbles. And here's the walls. So I did all the other flats and joints and butts and beads and everything, but I'm just showing you a little more wall repair and stuff. Like this was a cracked butt joint on the existing wall. And you have to really press down and skim it super hard. So you can't leave the meat on the mud that I like to. You got to really scrape it off. So you better have your first coat nice and smooth or you're going to be seeing all those inconsistencies. So that was the final coat. And next day, it is sanding day again. And you saw I had 3 sanding poles. Well, I start with this one. It's an angled sanding sponge that attaches to a sanding pole. And this, again, was money well spent. It really cut my time sanding angles in half. And I don't spend anywhere near as much time shining a light into the angles with the sponge. Next, I go around the whole job, sanding every single surface. And time to strap on the stilts. Time to do the ceilings. And I use this broader, flatter one for doing the ceilings. I don't use it on the walls and for feathering joints. This is for big, broad surfaces. It doesn't do as good a job as burning down the edges, feathering joints. So, almost done those awful ceilings. And once you finish ceilings, you thank God, you do a little dance, and you hope to never have to do it again. But it's not over. It's time to sand the angles with a sponge and check the job over with a light. That's pretty much the last thing. So, another good couple hours with the sponge usually. Pick out those corners and you're done. Okay, so that's my taping process. It's fairly typical to how a lot of guys do it out here. I've tried it a lot of different ways with the tools over the last 5 or 6 years, and this is the system that I've kind of whittled down to suit the size jobs that I do and to get the most speed and the nicest results without going overboard buying a whole bunch of expensive tools that I'm never going to use. So thanks for watching. Now you know my taping method, and if you learned anything, it's your own damn fault. Thanks for watching Vancouver Carpenter.